Hey, folks, welcome to Phantoms and Monsters Radio. So, before I start with the presentation, I do want to mention the following. I'm putting an open request out to the Chicagoland winged humanoid witnesses. Hopefully, some people can get a hold of me. And I've been reaching out publicly to reconnect with witnesses who previously contacted me about their winged humanoid encounter or sighting in Chicago and the surrounding region. Now, for years, I've documented reports from individuals who encounter large flying humanoid entities throughout Chicagoland, including areas around O'Hare and Des Plaines and Lake Michigan and other locations, even down into Indiana. Now, these witness accounts have helped shape one of the most compelling ongoing anomalous mysteries in the country. I'm currently involved in preparations connected to an upcoming film and television production centered on these sightings and the broader investigation as well. And over time, many of the witness contact details have become kind of outdated. Email addresses have changed, phone numbers are no longer active, communication with several important witnesses, unfortunately, has been lost. And I'm in the process of trying to take care of that. So if you previously shared your sighting report with me, or you have a new sighting, I greatly appreciate you hearing from you. And if you know someone who has reported such an encounter, please pass this message along. I'm especially interested in reconnecting with the original witnesses whose cases helped establish the scope and seriousness of the Chicagoland winged humanoid wave. Now, any renewed contact will be handled respectively and privately. Speaking with me again does not commit you to a public appearance or media participation. It simply gives us an opportunity to reconnect, review your account, and discuss whether you may wish to be involved with the next phase of the investigation. If you are one of those witnesses, please contact me directly through Phantoms and Monsters or send me a private message. When writing, please include the approximate date, location, circumstances of your sighting so I can match the message to my records. Thank you and to everyone who's trusted me with these experiences. Your testimony has mattered from the beginning, and it matters now. So please contact me if you can. So for tonight, in some states, the unexplained seems to settle into the land itself. Not just one town or one haunted road, but across cemeteries, backwoods, farms, creeks, caverns, and forgotten stretches of highway where witnesses are left with the same realization. They saw something that should not exist. So tonight we travel to Indiana, where the accounts are not only strange but deeply unsettling. Towering winged humanoids, great disturbing beast, black clad intruders, horned sentinels, lizard like entities, and impossible roadside creatures all emerge from the same landscape, separated by time but bound by the same undercurrent of dread. Now, what makes these reports especially compelling is that they do not point to one neat explanation. Instead, they suggest a region where multiple forms of high strangeness continue to surface, sometimes as fleeting encounters, sometimes as lifelong trauma, and sometimes as events that just seem to be tied to the land itself. Some witnesses describe overwhelming fear, others describe intelligence, intention, and even pursuit. But in every case, the memory remained vivid because whatever was encountered was real enough to leave a mark. So tonight's presentation is a journey through some of the most bizarre and disturbing Indiana reports that I've received. And by the end, you may find yourself asking whether these are isolated incidents or fragments of much larger hidden patterns. And folks, if you do enjoy the state reports, just let me know about it. I know some people enjoyed the last one, so I figured I'd do Indiana this time since we do get a lot of reports out of Indiana. And I can go to other states as well, but let me know if that's what you want. Anyway, the strangest encounters often begin in the quietest moments when the world's still, the house is dark, and no reason at all for a child to leave the safety of bed. But in the summer of 1996, in Wanatah, Indiana, one young witness was pulled from sleep by a feeling so powerful, so urgent, that he stepped outside and walked straight towards something waiting in the darkness. What he saw near the fence line was not human, not animal, and not something he would ever forget. Standing upright in the night was a towering winged figure with a muscular chest, folded wings along its back, and a vivid red slit-like eyes that burned through the dark. Then, with a violent rush of air and a loud whooshing ascent, the being launched skyward and vanished. And for the witness, the terror did not end there, because what happened later would only deepen the sense that this encounter may have been tied to something ominous still unfolding around that property. So the witness, Earl, was 12 years old this summer 1996, living with his family on South Haskell Road in Wanatah, Indiana. He had been asleep in a back bedroom when, early in the morning hours, he suddenly awakened by an intense sensation. He became convinced that he had left something of great importance outside of the house. Now, the feeling was so strong that he got out of bed and walked onto the front porch. From there, he began moving toward a 7-foot-tall fence located roughly 30 feet from the side of the house. And at that moment, he noticed a dark, upright figure standing near the fence line. The being appeared to be between 7 and 8 foot tall. It had a humanoid form, dark coloration, and stood fully erect or upright. Its eyes were described as long vertical slits that projected a vivid red light. And as Earl moved closer, he began to grasp the entity's size and abruptly froze in place. He observed what appeared to be large wings folded along its back, though he never saw them extend. He also noted well-defined musculature across the creature's chest. Now, while facing the entity, he heard 3 repeated bumping sounds. Without warning, the figure ascended rapidly into the air. Now, Earl described a loud whooshing sound as it lifted upward and disappeared into the darkness. He immediately ran back into the house and watched from the inside, fearing the entity might approach the porch. But nothing else occurred that night. But not long afterward, the house on South Haskell Road burned to the ground. Now, Earl initially didn't connect the fire to the encounter, but later reflected on the long-standing association of winged humanoid sightings with misfortune or ominous events. Now, in subsequent conversations, Earl shared additional details. A neighbor had reportedly seen strange beings in the wooded area behind the property. And according to the neighbor, fox traps had been torn open and animals removed. Now, after the fire, Earl continued to hunt squirrels in the same woods. On at least 2 occasions, he left the harvested game secured while he continued hunting, only to return to find the squirrels had been taken. Each time he noticed branches and bushes moving nearby as though something had just vacated the area. Now, years later, after getting married, Earl relocated to Wayne Drive in LaPorte, Indiana. He reported that unexplained activity had continued intermittently around his property. He describes an ongoing intuitive awareness of unseen entities in this vicinity, a sensation that has never really subsided. So, what Earl described in Wanatah feels kind of like an account that lingers long after the witness leaves the scene. A tall winged figure, glowing slit red eyes, a violent upward ascent, and then not long afterward, a devastating fire that destroyed the home. Whether that final event was a coincidence or something more symbolic, it reflects a pattern that has long characterized winged humanoid lore. Dread first, meaning later. But Indiana's unexplained history doesn't begin with modern witnesses. In fact, some of the oldest mysteries are even more disturbing because they involve something unseen moving beneath the earth itself. Now, the next case takes us back more than a century to a cemetery near Shelbyville, where graves were torn open from below, and terrified local residents claimed that something inside the burial ground roared back at them. Now, in March 1913, a rural cemetery east of Lewis Creek near Shelbyville became the center of a chilling mystery that left local residents shaken and afraid. Graves were violated from below. Coffins were torn apart and human remains were scattered while something unseen roared from within the earth itself. More than a century later, the incident still raises unsettling questions about what truly stalked Patterson Cemetery. Now, this is a newspaper account from March 21st, 1913, Shelbyville, Indiana. And the article states, an uncanny sensation has gripped Shelby County in recent years, particularly affecting residents near Patterson Cemetery east of Lewis Creek. Some unknown creature or entity is desecrating graves in the cemetery, and those who have investigated the situation have been unable to solve the mystery. The creature burrows into the graves, tearing apart coffins and scattering bits of broken wood, spinal columns, arms, legs, bones on the surface. It roars like a lion when intruders venture too close to the scene of its activity. Now, initially, it was believed that woodchucks were responsible for the disturbances, but this theory has been dismissed as no such animals have been seen in the cemetery. Now, the situation was first discovered by women who visited the cemetery to tend to their relatives' graves. They noticed a large hole in one of the graves, and as they began to investigate, a roar erupted from within the grave, prompting them to flee the cemetery in terror. And they haven't returned since. Local men then approached the cemetery armed with picks, shovels, and guns. They found bones and coffin fragments scattered across the graveyard. Upon digging into several disturbed graves, they confirmed that these graves had been used as shelters by some creature, but they could not identify the species. The men continued their investigation with determination until they reached a grave where it was suspected the creature might still be at work. There, the men lost their nerve, and several admitted to being just as frightened as the women. The effort to unravel the mystery continues, but the creature remains elusive and as active as ever. Now, I tried to find uh, any any reference to this, and if there were any resolutions to it as well. And I couldn't find a thing. So if anybody does hear anything, please let me know about it. That this 1913 cemetery case is disturbing not only because of the desecration, but because of the atmosphere surrounding it. Fear spread quickly, explanations failed, and even armed men lost their nerve when they got too close. It's one of those Indiana incidents where the physical evidence was real enough, yet the source remained completely beyond reach. And that same tension appears again in a much more modern Shelbyville account, though this time the mystery is not hidden underground. Instead, it arrives in black vehicles with men in dark overalls. Failed cell signals and a neighbor's report involved two glowing child-sized beings in a field. If either case hinted at something inhuman beyond understanding, this next one suggests that someone may already have known far more than they were willing to admit. So the witness contacted me and stated, "My son and I need answers. We live in separate houses near Shelbyville, Indiana. On Saturday, July 28th, 2012, at approximately 10:45 p.m., I received a call from my son. He was very shaken and upset, saying that men were searching the field behind his house and asking if I could come over. Since we live fairly close, I quickly jumped into my truck and headed down the road. And when I arrived at his house, two black Land Rovers were blocking the driveway. So I had to park in the front yard. As soon as I got out of my truck, a tall man dressed in black coveralls approached me and asked who I was and what I was doing there. I told him it was none of his business and that my son lived there. He was wearing unusual sunglasses that had a greenish glare in the lens, even though it was nighttime. He suddenly backed off and walked toward the back of the house. I followed him to the backyard where my son and daughter-in-law were standing on the patio. The man asked if he should call the police since they wouldn't talk to him. I told him to go ahead because these men were on his property without permission. Now, as soon as I mentioned police, the men all ran to their vehicles. There were two Land Rovers in front and at least two more parked in the alley behind the neighbor's house. They disappeared within minutes. I noticed that one of the Land Rovers had a red license plate with 5 digits. That's all I could see. I tried to call the police, but my cell phone lost its signal, which was unusual. My son's cell phone also failed to connect. Now, my son walked over to the neighbor's house to use their phone, but no one was home. We decided to go back inside the house and sit at the dining room table trying to figure out why these men had been there. Then my daughter-in-law suggested it might be connected to the UFO report the neighbor had made a week before. No sooner had she said that than a car horn started blaring outside. We ran out the front door and saw my wife running towards me in a panic. She explained that men dressed in black were searching our barn at home. I quickly got in my truck and sped home, but when I arrived, no one was around. I sat in my truck, bewildered what was going on. Just then, my cell phone rang. Our service was working again. It was my son who explained that the neighbor had filed a UFO report after being scared by what they described as two 3-foot-tall glowing boys walking in the field behind their house. My son doesn't believe in UFOs or aliens, so he just brushed it off. So do you think the men in the Land Rovers were looking for evidence? I searched the internet and found your site. I read some of the reports that others have sent you. Please keep my name and information private. I feel the need to investigate this further since these men were sneaking around my property. Please contact me at your earliest convenience. Well, I did contact the witness as soon as I received the email, and this is not the first time I've heard of men in black coveralls. It doesn't fit the profile, at least of one private aerospace group, which is Bigelow Aerospace at the time, that was involved in investigating citizen sightings. Of course, they no longer do that. They were actually taking reports Bigelow was actually taking reports coming into MUFON. And they were given to Bigelow, and they were actually going out and checking. I had several people who had filed UFO reports over the years, ending maybe about 8 years ago or so, where Bigelow had been investigating, and they had their own people going out there. So I don't know if that's what it was or not, but it does seem like it may be a connection there. But I never found out anything later after that. Now, when witnesses start asking whether strangers in black vehicles are searching for evidence before local authorities even arrive, the case shifts from strange to deeply unsettling. The details about the glowing boys in the field is bizarre enough on their own, but the coordinated response and sudden communication failures and the speed of their disappearance all suggest an operation rather than a coincidence. Still, not every Indiana mystery comes with suspicious men and organized intrusion. Sometimes the witness is left with nothing but a roadside encounter so bizarre that it seems to change form in real time. Now, the next report from Miami County begins with a towering black unnatural figure on a dark rural road and ends with a massive dog-like creature that may or may not have been the same thing. Now, the witness tells me this incident occurred in 2007 in Miami County, Indiana, near Peru, approximately 2 miles from the Honey Bear Hollow campground. I was working the night shift, and a coworker and I were driving down a country road after work, likely around 4:45 a.m. while it was still dark outside. I noticed my coworker's taillights brighten as if he was braking when he swerved into a ditch and back onto the road. Now, as I approached the same area, I saw a tall black figure standing on the road. It was moving in a strange, unnatural way, almost like it was blowing in the wind, but it clearly wasn't. At first, I thought it was an exceptionally tall person wrapped in a large black blanket because I couldn't see any arms or head, just two big legs and a torso. I swerved to avoid it, coming to a complete stop as the figure passed by my driver's window. It was around 7 foot tall, leaning forward and at least a foot taller than my vehicle. As it moved behind my car, the taillights illuminated its legs, but I couldn't make out any details such as hair or clothing, only large, thick black legs. I quickly drove down the road once it had passed, and I saw my coworker pulling into the gravel parking lot, so I parked next to him. He was panicking, asking if I had seen it and how it appeared to be missing a head. I suggested we go back and investigate as the figure seemed oblivious to us driving right at it. Although he was reluctant, he decided to follow me. We drove back to the area, and there, in roughly the same spot, was a large black dog lying across the road. And this was no ordinary canine. It was much larger than any normal dog, but it looked dead. It hadn't been there just a few minutes earlier when we drove past. I decided to get out and check it if it was alive and to move it off the road, as it was positioned in a way that made it difficult to drive around. And as I approached about 15 foot away, it raised its head and looked at me. Its eyes were glowing yellow, which I believed was due to the vehicle's lights reflecting off of them. It let out a deep, low, rumbling growl, and I stopped instantly. The creature attempted to stand up on its hind legs, but seemed to have trouble with its front legs. It managed to stand for a brief moment, enough time to look at me before hunkering back down to all fours and running off into the woods. Now, there was a tall fence nearby, and I was unsure how it managed to disappear, as it would have had to go over, under, or through the fence, or perhaps it just vanished. I also noticed that its front legs didn't seem to be in use while it ran off. Now, after this encounter, something strange happened again. My coworker got out of his car after the dog creature ran off and approached me to say, "What the heck was that?" While we talked, I noticed a mouse standing between us, also on its hind legs, as if it were washing its face. I nudged it, I nudged it with my shoe, and it didn't seem to care about our presence at all. It just continued cleaning itself, much like the first figure we saw. We eventually left and went our separate ways. Later that day, I began researching werewolves and came across a story about Dogman. The only difference I can note is that this creature didn't have the hands and feet often reported by witnesses. It had normal dog paws. Its appearance was reminiscent of a large black wolf, but the fur was fluffy, which didn't match typical wolf fur. It was definitely not a bear, and I knew the difference. The first figure we encountered was sometimes compared to what looked like a Fresno night crawler, but those are white and much smaller and shorter. Someone recently suggested that perhaps it had wings, which could explain why its arms and head were concealed. But I can confirm this. So I didn't see any details, just a shadowy figure. Its movement was peculiar, almost otherworldly. And often compare it to those inflatable tube men that flap around at the car dealerships. Now, the mouse is perhaps the oddest part of the experience for me because I physically touched it, confirming it was real. Yet it seemed completely indifferent to us. It wasn't until recently when I realized all three of these creatures were on two legs at one point. Are they connected? Who knows? I never saw anything like it again, and I live about 4 miles from where it happened, often driving through that area. So that Miami County case is hard to pin down because it refuses to remain in a single category. First, there is the tall, shapeless bipedal figure, and then there's the huge black canine with glowing eyes. Then, as if to mock any attempt at logic, there's the mouse standing there calmly on two legs between the witnesses. It reads almost like an environmental distortion, as though normal biological rules briefly ceased to apply to that stretch of road. That's what makes the next encounter especially interesting. In LaPorte County, the witness did not describe a towering monster or a spectral shape, but something smaller, older looking, and somehow just as disturbing. Hunched over in the woods, covered in blood, and feeding on what appeared to be a deer, it resembled less a modern cryptid and more a figure pulled straight from European folklore. So the witness tells me, this occurred around the time I graduated, 1995. My family lived in Michigan at the time, fairly close to the Indiana border. Some friends I played Dungeons and Dragons with became interested in ghost hunting, and we often traveled to LaPorte County, Indiana, about 45 minutes away. Now, on this particular night, we had picked up the girl I was dating. She and I were sitting in the back seat while my two buddies were in the front. We found ourselves on a somewhat secluded two-lane road with thick woods on the right side. I'm not trying to be vague. I simply don't remember much about the area or exactly where we were. John, I said, don't trust what you see around here. I've heard your eyes can play tricks on you in this area. Almost on cue, we began to see what looked like black fog or shadows darting and swimming across the road in the headlights. We remained calm and kept driving. Eventually, the road turned off to the right into the woods, and we took the turn. After about a quarter mile, the road either continued straight onto the gravel or turned to the left. So we chose the left. At this point, we were driving slowly, maybe 5 miles an hour, and both my girlfriend and I were looking out the passenger side window. About 15 foot into the woods, maybe 30 feet away from us, I saw what appeared to be a small, old troll hunched over, eating something bloody and messy with its back to us. My mind immediately went to folklore, and I thought red cap as soon as I saw it, even though it wasn't wearing anything. I slowly turned to my girlfriend because it was a lot to see without feeling crazy, and her eyes were wide with fear, tears streaming down her face. She was petrified. We both told my friends in the front that we needed to leave. There was something in the woods. She was crying, and I was freaking out also. The two in the front didn't see it and were frantic to know what we had just seen, wanting to drive by again, which we absolutely did not want to do. About 100 yards later, the road turned right onto the gravel, and the driver decided to turn around there and head back the way we came. So after we turned around and started off the gravel, the car died, and It wasn't a clutch issue. It was an automatic. My girlfriend started screaming, and the driver told her to relax as he tried to turn the engine over. Thankfully, it started up again. However, the moment the car turned over, the headlights immediately turned on. Mind you, it was pitch black outside. There was no street lights. It was heavily wooded area, and we hadn't seen another car in ages. We were just facing the spot where this car appeared while trying to turn around. At this point, we all agreed that we were in a place we shouldn't be and needed to leave. We drove back past the spot where we had seen the small old troll, and there was nothing there now. No troll, no deer, which I believe it had been eating. We reached the area that branched off to the gravel road when we first entered this location. And as we approached it, a set of headlights turned on from the gravel road, followed by others. Inside the car, the four of us were freaking out, convinced we had stumbled into some weird occult activity we didn't want any part of, and all we wanted was to go home. We drove back out to the main 2-lane road that led us there, and the other cars went their separate ways eventually. That's been over 20 years ago, and I still get chills thinking about it. The image of that little gnarly troll hunched over eating the deer is as vivid as it ever was. A lot of strange things happened when I lived in the Bridgman, Michigan area. This was the most extreme, but I had about 20 years worth of unexplained experiences that cram into 2 years that I lived there. To describe the red cap further, from what I remember, it was naked, maybe 3.5 foot tall if it stood upright, and very stocky. It was squatted low, its bottom almost to the ground where it ate, and it was somewhat hairy on its shoulder and back. Blood covered its hands and forearms, and it was holding what looked like a leg of a deer, with the mess of the rest of it at its feet. I had about 3/4 view of it, mostly its back, and I didn't get a good look at its face, though it glanced over its shoulder at us nonchalantly as we drove by. I just remember it looked old and menacing, like a furious little 70-year-old man, unnerving to say the least. Some reports are disturbing because of their size. Others are disturbed because familiarity has been twisted into something wrong. That LaPorte County encounter carries that folkloric edge. That sense that the witness did not simply see an animal in the woods, but something ancient, intelligent, and predatory. The way it casually glanced back while feeding on it deepens that impression. But Indiana's unexplained landscape is not limited to forest and back roads. Some of its strangest reports come from beneath the surface, in places where rock, darkness, and isolation already work against the senses. The next witness was touring a cavern in Harrison County when she noticed a bright yellow eye beneath an overhang and then watched a small lizard-like humanoid emerge from the stone. So in May 2015, I received a voicemail from a woman in Muncie, Indiana. She and a companion witnessed a frightening, unexplained lizard-like humanoid while touring a cavern in Harrison County, Indiana. Now, I conducted 2 interviews with the witness, whom I'll refer to as Gigi. Now, Gigi is Dominican national, and her English is fair. This made it somewhat challenging to gather information. So I just listed the details, and this is what she told me. The date and time was Tuesday, August 26, 2014 at 2:30 p.m. during a tour of the Squire Boone Caverns in southern Indiana. The witness and her friend were part of a group from Muncie, Indiana. The cavern tour was an itinerary highlight after spending the previous day shopping and touring in Louisville, Kentucky. Now, during the tour, they reached an area with several small underground waterfalls. There were some large flat rocks on the right side of the waterfall, including a few overhangs. Gigi noticed that appeared to be a bright yellow eye shining from beneath one of the overhangs, which gave her chills. Her friend asked what she was looking at, so she pointed toward the rocks, and her friend saw the same eye looking back at them. They stood there for about 5 minutes watching the eye as it appeared and disappeared. The pair was about 30 foot from the rock, and although there was some movement, it was hard to see in the dim light. Now, when the tour began to move on, Gigi looked back at the eye and saw something exit from underneath the overhang. She paused to watch it crawl onto the exposed rock and then stood on its back legs. Almost immediately, it scurried away into another crevice in the rock. Gigi described it as resembling a lizard about 1.5 feet tall, with long, almost human-like arms and legs and a short tail. She quickly rejoined her group, but continued to glance behind her. Although her friend did not see the lizard, Gigi described it to her after they returned to the bus. Now, Gigi was visibly shaken. Her friend gave her a lorazepam pill to help calm her down. Other people on the bus noticed that she was trembling. She chose not to mention her sighting to the rest of the group. Now, the following day, Gigi felt very ill. Now, while it could have been a reaction to the pill, she believed that something occurred to her physically and mentally because of what she saw. Gigi feels that she was not meant to witness the lizard-like being. Now, Gigi has agreed to allow me to share some of her experience on the blog and, regarding the detail of the sighting, although her personal information remains confidential. She's curious if anybody else has encountered something similar and would like to know the outcome of their experiences, especially at Squire Boone Caverns. Now, the Squire Boone Caverns sighting stands out because it feels so sharply localized. This was not a fleeting shadow in the periphery or a misidentified animal in the bad light. The witness focused on one glowing eye, watched the movement, and then saw a small reptilian figure stand upright before it vanished back into the rock. Just as notable is the aftermath, because she believed the encounter affected her physically and mentally long after the tour ended. Now, that idea that certain places may hold presences tied to the land itself leads directly into the next case. Near Sugarloaf Mound, a witness and his friend described a massive black horned figure standing in a haunted yard, radiating hostility without making a sound. In this account, the question is not merely what was seen, but whether it was guarding something or summoned by something already rooted there. So the witness tells me this happened back in 2011. The people on the account are me, my ex-girlfriend, whom I will call Penny, and a friend who I will call Kyle. These aren't their real names. I just don't feel comfortable sharing them online. Now, my mother asked us to pick up her cat from the vet around 4 or 5 p.m. It was winter in Indiana, and it was getting dark around that time. It was already a bit of a drive to and from the vet because my mother lived out in the country, and the vet was in town. At any rate, we went to pick up the cat without issue, and after we dropped it off, Penny, Kyle, and I were going to see a movie. We get back to my mother's house, and the sun is already set for the most part, and it's quite cold. Kyle helped me carry the cat inside while Penny kept the car running to keep the heater going. Kyle liked talking to my mother and wanted to see her before we headed back out to the movie. We were walking up to the house when both Kyle and I stopped because we got a weird feeling at the same time. We figured out later that we were talking about it. The house is in the front of us, and my mother's yard is behind us. It was a big farmhouse, so it had a sprawling front yard. We both stood still, frozen in the spot by this weird feeling, and I looked first and saw something standing behind us in the yard. Then Kyle looked too. The thing had to have been well over 6'3" because that's how tall Kyle is, and it was bigger than him. It had a hulking shape with more mass on top than on the bottom, like a hunchback. That just tapered off into the shadows, so I don't know if it had legs or what it might have looked like. The whole thing was pitch black, even in the dark. It had no eyes, no discernible facial features, but I could tell it was huge and very angry. There was just a feeling I got from it that it was mad at us while we were there, and I could tell it was staring right at us. Now, the only discernible feature about it were it had horns, massive horns, like antlers sticking up from its head. And the hunch in its back seemed to be lumpy and had irregular shapes sticking out of it. But because it was so dark, I couldn't figure out what it was. Now, neither of us heard a sound from it. It just stood there and menaced us for what felt like minutes, but it can't have been that long. Cal unfroze me from the spot, and the two of us darted into my mother's house and delivered the cat. We waited a bit, but after looking outside, we didn't see anything else out there. So after talking to my mother for a bit, we ran back outside. Penny put on the gas, and we got out of there. Now, we never saw it again after that, but to add a little background to my mother's house, it has always been haunted. The house that is standing there now is a newer building. The older farmhouse that had been there previously had burned down, killing a young boy, a mother, and older daughter. Now, my mother has had issues with it for a long time. She had the house blessed on several occasions, but nothing ever sticks. Friends who stayed in the house have reported weird stuff happening to them as well. And I lived there, I experienced some odd things also, but this was the only time it happened. The house is situated in Indiana near Sugarloaf Mound, which was used by the Miami natives in Indiana's prehistory. Now, look, I kind of suspect this entity may have been what is referred to as a leshy. I've heard and read of similar manifestations in different areas of North America. They seem to be some type of guardian or sentinel. There may be a lingering energy from the property that had summoned this being, but that I don't know. But by the description, it's very similar to what people have described. So the Sugarloaf Mound encounter carries the unmistakable feeling of a territorial presence. Not a passing apparition, not a random animal, but something that seemed aware of the witnesses and offended by their presence. Coupled with the property's dark history and the repeated reports of haunting activity, this suggests that certain landscapes do not merely host phenomena, but retain and project them. Now, the next account offers a very different tone, though it may involve another form of land-based intelligence. In southern Indiana, a young trapper began hearing whistles, smelling sulfur, and noticing signs that something large was shadowing her movements along a creek lined with native relics. What followed was not an attack, but a strange, quietly emotional exchange that may have become a form of mutual recognition. So she tells me about 20 years ago, after I graduated from high school in southern tip of Indiana, I used to set traps to make extra money during the winter. Since I was pregnant with my daughter, any form of extra income was necessary. My father often spoke of the creek where I trapped, describing it as quite strange. He used to walk along that creek to collect arrowheads and search for other Shawnee relics. He shared many stories about the Shawnee Native American tribe, their history, and the folklore. It was a very special place for us. And when I started trapping, my father emphasized the importance of respecting wildlife. Don't litter, just kill humanely, and only take what is necessary. This instilled in me a deep appreciation for life, eventually leading to my career in conservation. I share this background to explain why I did what I did. About once a week while walking along the creek, I would hear whistling that sounded human, but was random in pattern. I also picked up a sulfur-like odor reminiscent of rotten eggs. My dad told me it was mostly likely Bigfoot, and sightings had been reported in the area for as long as we could remember. So one day while scanning the tree line with my binoculars to check for coyotes and foxes in my traps, I noticed a medium-sized tree swing dramatically, like past the tree line. I headed that way with my .22 rifle, hoping to sneak up on a bobcat or any animal of a size that my rifle could take down with a headshot. And by the time I was 3/4 of the way to the tree line, the swing stopped, and I couldn't see anything. But I heard at least two creatures whistling and whooping further back into the forest. As I continued up the creek, I could sense that whatever it was still followed me at that distance. Sadly, one day an oil fracking company purchased most of the land, although they still gave me permission to trap. They had a few accidents that contaminated the water, killing nearly everything, and it broke my heart to see beavers, muskrats, and raccoons floating down the creek. After that, they installed their rigs and cleared most of the forest. The environment became a bit hostile. One day, while checking my traps, I discovered that nearly all of them had been ruined, bent, beaten, and broken. The few animals I managed to catch had either been stolen or ripped away with their legs or feet still attached. I even found a coyote that had suffered severe injuries. Its fur was torn, its lower jaw was broken, and its head was badly beaten. It felt like retaliation for what the oil company had done. For a few months afterwards, I went to the store twice a week and bought a variety of apples and pears, along with a mix of meats from the carcasses I had skinned. I would place the food in a basket and leave it in the forest, hoping whatever creature was out there would find it before anyone else did. Sometimes the basket would disappear, but within 2 days, everything was gone. One day, I believe it left me a gift in return. Next to where I had dropped off the basket, I found over 100 small sticks stacked neatly with 20 acorns and a deer antler. This made me feel happy. I hope that I was able to keep this creature during a difficult time in its life, or help this creature during a difficult time in its life, even though I never physically saw it or found any tracks along the creek bed. All my experiences occurred in those woods near the creek, so I really can't say for sure what it was. Even now, 20 years later, I think about it from time to time. I don't believe there's any reason for people to be afraid of these creatures. My time during those 2 winter seasons were both sad and positive. Even if I was dealing with an animal I didn't recognize, I hope I made a difference. Now, that creek account is one of the more nuanced reports in this collection because it combines classic Bigfoot indicators with something almost relatable. The whistles, the movement of the trees, the destruction of traps, and the disappearance of captured animals all suggest a powerful unseen presence. Yet, the latter gifting exchange introduces another possibility that the witness was not merely being observed, but also evaluated. And from there, we move into one of the most intense and disturbing Indiana winged humanoid reports on record. This final case predates the modern wave and centers on a child in Rolling Prairie who awoke to find a tall winged being inside the family trailer. What followed was not simply a sighting, but an alleged abduction witnessed at least in part by multiple family members. Now, on the night of October 27th, 1969, a young child in rural Indiana had an encounter that would shape the rest of his life. What began as strange sounds and a foul odor inside the family's trailer escalated into reported abduction by a winged humanoid. Now, this account is significant because it predates the modern wave of winged humanoid sightings and was corroborated by multiple family members. I received a telephone call from the eyewitness, F.H., who later publicly identified himself as Floyd Hancock, and he insisted that I use his name in the account. He described a harrowing event that occurred in Rolling Prairie when he was a young child living with his family on this rural property. Now, at the time, Floyd lived in a trailer with his mother, father, sister, and grandmother. The trailer roof had sustained damage, leaving a large hole temporarily covered by a wide waterproof tarp until repairs could be made. Floyd shared a bedroom with his infant sister. Late that night, Floyd was awakened by an unusual noise accompanied by a strong, disagreeable odor. And as he turned towards his sister's crib, he saw a tall winged humanoid leaning over her. The being slowly turned its head and locked eyes with him. Floyd described the entity as extremely tall and slightly crouched, estimating its height at about 7 to 8 foot. Its body and face were covered in black hair, and it had massive leathery wings shaped like those of a bat or gargoyle. The arms and legs appeared muscular and oddly detached from his torso. Overall, the being had a thin, muscular, human-like build with prominent, sharp teeth. Its eyes seemed dark, and he emitted a low, garbled vocalization. Floyd screamed to alert his parents in the adjoining room, but there was no response. His grandmother was the only one to react. She entered the room, saw the entity, and collapsed to her knees in shock. The winged humanoid picked up Floyd and carried him into the living room. From there, it ascended through the hole in the ceiling, having clearly moved the tarp aside to gain entry. Floyd remembers feeling extremely cold and wet as he was taken upward, and he recalls hearing his grandmother scream as the creature launched into the night sky. Floyd has no memory how long he was gone. His next recollection is waking up back in his bed surrounded by his frantic parents and grandmother. Now, according to Floyd, his grandmother witnessed the entire event and documented it at the time. Living relatives later confirmed the details, as his grandmother repeatedly recounted exactly what each family member experienced that night. She passed away in 1985. Floyd stated that his parents appeared to wake up only after the abduction had ended. He believed that they were placed in a hypnotic or suppressed state until the entity had left with him. Now, several minutes later, the family heard scratching noises followed by a heavy thud on the roof. Floyd's father immediately climbed on the roof and found Floyd lying unconscious. They brought him inside, dried him off, and placed him back in bed. No authorities or medical professionals were contacted due to the fear and confusion surrounding the event. Now, Floyd physically recovered, but he reports experiencing lifelong emotional and psychological trauma directly attributed to the abduction. And when the film The Mothman Prophecies was released, he suffered a severe emotional breakdown while watching it in the theater. And I hear that a lot. He had to leave during the car crash scene and has never watched the film since. When asked why he contacted me after all these years, Floyd explained that a cousin, aware of the winged humanoid sightings in Indiana and Chicago area, shared my contact information with him. He expressed relief in learning that others had reported encounters with similar beings. Now, taken together, these Indiana cases do not present a single phenomenon. They present a landscape of recurring impossibilities. Winged humanoids, graveyard disturbances, men in black, glowing child-sized figures, horned sentinels, reptilian humanoids, red cap-like predators, and possibly Sasquatch interaction all emerged from the same state across different decades under very different circumstances. And yet there is a connective thread. These reports repeatedly point to places, to certain roads, burial grounds, caves, creeks, fields, and homes where reality seems thinner. And the witness testimony takes on the same charged quality. Indiana may not be discussed as often as other paranormal hotspots, but based on these accounts, it deserves to be. Now, when you examine these Indiana encounters together, the first thing you notice is the variety. Winged humanoids, gravesite desecrations, so on and so on. But the deeper you go, the more they begin to feel like different expressions of the same underlying reality. One in which certain places seem to attract, produce, or reveal phenomena that do not fit within the ordinary world. That may be the real story behind Unexplained Indiana. Not simply that strange things happen there, but that they happen in ways that repeatedly challenge our assumptions about what is possible, what is natural, and what may be sharing the landscape with us. These witnesses came from different decades, different counties, and different walks of life, yet many of them described the same essential aftermath: shock, dread, fascination, and a lingering sense that what they experienced was only part of the much bigger mystery. As always, I want to hear your thoughts. Have you seen something similar in Indiana or elsewhere? Please leave your comments, share your experience, help us continue documenting the phenomena that so many are still reluctant to discuss. Now, if you've had an experience or experienced anything like this or had an unexplained encounter or sighting, please send your report to Phantoms and Monsters. And as always, thanks for listening. So, folks, you got any questions, put them in caps and put them up there. We'll see what we can do. See if we can answer it for you. Got a good crowd tonight. I guess these state reports are popular. Okay, dagnammit. I don't want to sound gross, but when you are in fear in the woods, the ND-no-chrome gene kicks in inside your body and makes your skin and meat taste much sweeter for wildlife to consume. Well, I had never heard that before. That's an interesting quote. Maybe there's something to that, though. That is interesting. Sir Wolf, hi, Lon. Do you get many small cryptid reports? If people are not scared, they may not bother reporting them. Yeah, I do get some, but normally, maybe they're not cryptids. Maybe they're humanoids or something. Usually, there's something that's standing up and more human than non-human, as opposed to a Bigfoot or cryptid canine or winged humanoid. But no, I do get a few. And as we go into some of these state, if we do more state report presentations, there's going to be a variety of different things that pop up. Sir Wolf, a mouse-sized dogman might go unnoticed. Yeah, I would believe so. Alex staring. Off-topic line, can you do a show on curses and cursed items? I think I did one a while back, but I can dig into some things. I've got some reports somewhere, so yeah, I can do that. Grandizer 12 question, Lon, what theories do you have, if any, on nighttime on the road encounters with various forms of cryptids? Are they the same cryptid or totally different? I don't know. Probably the same. I mean, if you get reports as many as I do, they kind of blend in together. So they're normally describing something very similar. But hell, you never know. I mean, something might show up that I've never even heard about. And that's when you get paranormal gold. So, but occasionally something pops up. Grandizer 12, Lon Strickler, big fan. What are your theories on so many roadside nighttime encounters? Easy human prey, victims of the cryptid, other theories. I guess it's just being in the right place at the right time. And of course, it being night, I guess they feel more safe being out there in the dark as opposed to in broad daylight. Sure, you're going to get much more happen during the nighttime. That's just natural. Dagnabbit, a girl had an experience on Bray Road where she saw a ball of light the size of a basketball that was floating away. She stepped on a branch, the ball stopped and started to come towards her. Yeah, there have been several like that on Bray Road and around that area. There's been a lot of phenomena. It's just in that area. It's just not dogman or upright canines and such. There's a lot of other stuff that goes on. There are apparitions, and also there seem to be manifesting type of possible ultra-terrestrials that have been seen over the years as well. There's a bunch of stories that have come out of it over time. Anything else, folks? Okay. Well, until we meet again, and just stay aware, stay safe, and as always, keep looking into the unexplained. Nice evening. Have a great weekend. See you next Friday. Good night.